Yo, 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 what up? It's Mrs. Zoo Nation coming at you with my top five. Well, kind of sort of a top five. This is more dedicated to the budget players. But first, I would like to make a couple announcements. One now and another one at the end of the video. The first announcement I like to make before we start this off is I done fucked up. If you see my last video, which you probably haven't, but if you see my last video, I talked a little bit more about G Guardian, and I have fucked up because one of the rulings I mentioned in the video was both players have to be at Generation Break 3 in order to use these, but I misread it, and you had to be at Grade 3 to use the effect. So I've done fucked up. I will admit this. I'm sorry, but as far as the whole, changing from 8 to 16 and the game is slightly dying statement, I'm gonna stick to that statement. That's the only reason why I'm not gonna take the video down. Now, I'm gonna redo it, but I'm not gonna take it down. So, um, so let's commence. Now, as a budget player myself, um, I was I took out of the thing of being a budget player, but now I'm back at it. I'm giving this thing because if there's one thing that I do think should be the most looked at thing in any card game, whether it's this one, whether it's Magic, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh, whether it's Pokemon, should be looking at budget players because let's face it, not everybody has the resources and the money to invest in things like that. And I know investing in a game like this, such as Car Fight Vanguard, it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of investment and it takes a lot of dedication in order to get good at this game. And it does take a lot of that just to even play this game and do everything revolved around it, whether or not it's playing the game, whether it's being competitive, whether it's trying to make a trade binder, all of that. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of investment, and all that is revolved around money. I'm still sick, so you hear those sniffles. Sorry about that. Anyway, so this is my five things every budget player should be doing and should look out for. Number five, can you afford the deck? This is very top and high priority on my list because, let's face it, there is a such thing as there's a difference between buying a deck and affording it. Now, to be honest, a majority of decks in the game is like, I will probably say if you were to buy a deck competitively, you will probably have to spend $200 at most minimum. Not saying that that's like every deck, but there is a lot of decks, including older decks that wasn't really doing anything, that are starting to get to those particular prices. Mainly because it wasn't like how it was a couple of years ago where all you had to worry about was perfect guards and grade threes. Now you have to worry about the type of sentinel using, the grade 3, the key cards to the deck, in like the grade 4s and whatnot, and how the deck is going to run in general. I mean, sometimes it even has to do with triggers depending on the clan because let's face it, because like the clan's been around for a lot longer than most, sometimes it's kind of hard to actually find certain triggers. I remember at one point before before which set was that? Before G Booster Set 2 came out, it was hard to find dictionary go for Great Nature for some reason. I do remember at one point it was a $5 heal trigger. because the trigger was so hard to find. Nobody really had them, and it was legitimately the only heal trigger in the whole deck. But now that we have like the bunnies and whatnot from Generation Break 2, that kind of went down and everything else, and it's whatever. So a lot of it is basically if you can afford a deck. Cause it's like, okay, so let me put it into like another terms. Um, excuse me. Anyway, let's put it into another terms. I can buy, let's say, I can try to buy a Gear Chronicle deck. I can try to buy a Gear Chronicle deck for $200. Now, I'm gonna put a slight bit of personal business in this particular video. I do not really have a an income job. I am a self employee, which means everything I do comes through commission. So it's not like if I was to work at, let's say, like some type of burger joint or whatnot, or some type of retail store where I get a check like every week or 2 weeks or whatnot. No, I get paid depending on how much work I can get into and everything like that. So $200 to somebody who works at, like, let's say Macy's or something like that is a lot easier to get to compared to somebody like me who are getting to $200 is like a blessing sometimes. But so I don't necessarily could get into $200. So like, let's say that particular person who like works at a retail store and stuff like that, they go buy this Gear Chronicle deck for about $200, and that's cool. They can spend $200 if they don't have to really pay any bills or whatnot. That's even cooler because they can just wait till next paycheck and be on about the business. Me, however, as a self-employee, like a starting self-employee, I can buy the deck for $200. Let me admit it. But at the same time, I'm gonna be struggling in hell. Like, I'll go from like doing regular dinners to like top ramen noodles at like one point at sometimes. So it's like, my thing is, I can spend the $200 getting the deck, but as far as living expenses going, that's gonna, how bad is that gonna affect me? So again, my whole thing is, if you can afford a deck, do it. So in other words, if you have income coming in, or if you're the type of person to get like spoiled or whatnot, if you can afford a deck, go ahead and get it. But just know that you're going to be a certified budget player if you can't necessarily afford it. You can save up for it, but will it fuck you up in the end? That's the whole point I'm getting at. Now, on to number two. Sometimes it is best to work with what you have. So that's number two. Work with what you have. Sometimes, I really wouldn't recommend getting into, buying into common lots or buying into lots in general. But I mean, let's face it. Sometimes you just gotta work with what you have. Like, a prime example of me is like, I have Pale Moon. Um, Pale Moon isn't necessarily going to be my main clan, and I'm going to use that for an example in one of my other ones. But all I can work with is the X is pretty much whatever common cards I have, and a couple of regular ones, as well as the trial decks. So I bought two trial decks. I put it together the best way I can. I picked out some of the commons. So instead of working like with like a whole rainbow trigger lineup, I'm using 8 crits. No, I'm using 10 crits, 2 draws, and 4 heals. That's what I'm using in my deck right now. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not like getting his ass kicked, but I mean, it is kind of stepping up to his own. And from what my friend did tell me, I do use like what I have very a lot. I even had to, you know, even without like with the purple trapezes, I had to like use alternatives and whatnot. And sometimes the alternatives are pretty good. One of the alternatives I'm using in my grade two lineup is a card called Misdirection. And if anybody doesn't know what she does, if she's in the soul and I call another card from the soul, I can superior call her from the soul into the rear guard circle, but she goes back at the end phase. Now, I pretty much this gives an effect of getting a 2 for 1 for like, let's say I was to use Harry's skill, pull out a grade 1. I can chain to her skill and call her out. Especially if I have two in the soul, I could just call two of them out and fill up the whole field by my just with one effect. Now that's good and all, but misdirection is like an 8K. So depending on how easy your opponent like damage check triggers, it's not going to work out it's not going to work out 100% all the time, but when it does, I make the best use of it. So, like I said, sometimes it's best to like buy some of the expensive stuff and buy mostly all the key cards like the grade threes and whatnot. I'm kind of satisfied with my grade three lineup. I'm using the break ride version of Harry, but right now, as far as my deck stands, I need to get like a couple more cards and then I'll be good. And then I have to start working on the extra deck, which will be the hardest part. Especially not the fact that I'm a budget player, but also the fact that I have like this little thing of if I'm not maining the clan, I'm not going to spend too much money on it. I try to spend the least money possible for a clan that I'm not really going to main and also try to make the best of it. So number three is if you're a starting Vanguard player, spend no more than $100. Let's face it. Playing a game like this or playing any card game in general takes a lot of investment. And to be honest, taking a lot of investment means you have to invest a lot of money into it. I've seen players in Yu-Gi-Oh! I've seen players in Magic. I've seen players in this card game that invested a lot of money into their decks only to find out that the game is not for them. And, luckily it's not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if you're to invest like a shitload of money on like a meta deck and like all of a sudden, oh, here comes the ban list, the ban list screws it up, you're not going to get your money back like that. I know that happened when Necross was there. Necross is one of the most expensive decks Yu-Gi-Oh ever had. Like an average Necross deck was from 600 to close to 1,000, like 500 to close to $1,000, and the ban list hit it. And I highly doubt anybody that spent that much money on a Necross deck probably got their money back unless they sold the deck very early. The same thing goes with recently Cosmos. That used to be like close to a $500 deck. It was like a $300 deck on average. I think it was a little bit more on average, but I know it was like over $300 alone just by like a couple of cards. But seeing that they reprinted everything and Gold Series, the deck is no longer like super expensive. It's now super cheap. I mean, it's not super cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than it originally was. And anybody who spent like a shitload of money on that deck, I kind of feel sorry for them. But spend no more. To be honest, before you want to make sure that you want Vanguard to become your main game, if you're gonna buy a deck, spend no more than like $100 on it. Sometimes I would recommend like usually like a trial deck or like one of the legendary decks. But to be honest, I think you will personally, in my personal opinion, I think you will learn to play the game a lot better if you build a deck from scratch. So for my number four one, only work with two decks. Again, this is mainly for people who is starting Vanguard or people. Yeah, this is mainly for the people who's starting Vanguard. Only work with two decks. Definitely suggest that one of those decks is a trial deck, only to get the feeling of how to, build from a pre-construction deck in order to have better odds at doing stuff, especially the new G ones. I'm very glad what they did with the G versions of the trial decks where they don't give you a bunch of random ass useless shit. They actually give you perfect guards in this one, which was good. I think low key, in my opinion, the other trial decks that they had when the game first came out would have been 10 times better if they came with perfect guards. Even if it came with just one perfect guard, it would have been a lot better. Especially when they came out with like Genesis, because getting perfect guards for Genesis back in the day was the hardest fucking thing to do. But I would say if you're going to be a budget player, work with two decks, and work with like a main deck and work with like a secondary deck. To be honest, your main deck should be the most money you should sink on a deck. If you're going to spend money on another deck, I suggest just getting either one of the legendary decks or getting one of the trial decks just to spend like a lot less money on it. This is mainly because if you're going to learn about the game, it's best to pick two decks, especially if both of those decks play completely different. Um, you want to get to learn, you want to get to know more aspects about the game and whatnot, and you also want to get to learn more experience about it. And what better way to learn experience than to experience playing other decks? For my last one, um, living expenses comes first. This all boils down to living expenses comes first. Um, do not sacrifice rent money just to get a gold powder deck. Do not sacrifice any type of living expenses just to get a certain deck. Remember that this game is a luxury, not a priority. Um, don't expect to have. I mean, if you have money to buy groceries and whatnot, buy groceries first. I mean, don't be one of those players that just constantly, don't be one of those players that like has some of the most expensive cards though, but their main breakfast, lunch, and dinner is like ramen noodles and all that other cheap shit that comes from like 99-cent store. Because, I mean, trust me, your body does, deserves the nutrition that it needs to get, as well as um, putting sacrifices in the game isn't a problem, but if it comes to a point where you're sacrificing living expensive just to get the most expensive cards, and you have a fucking problem. Don't do it. Um, do not do. I'm not stressing this out even more. Do not do it. I have come from personal experience. Not saying that I've gotten to a point where I sacrifice getting a super rare card from getting a thing. I would probably tell you that like one time, I don't have transportation. I take bus and whatnot. I will admit, there was one time I went to a card shop just to sell cards, just not to get any sales off of it, and I had no money to get home. The only way I got money to get home was I had to sell a card way less expensive than the price that it already was. It was like a $20 card, and I had to sell it for a couple of dollars. Trust me, that is not a very good feeling, especially for a dedicated card player such as myself. So, bottom line is, living expenses comes first. That's just that. Living expenses comes first. After that, you can blow up as much money as you want to. because trust me, especially a person like me that lives in California, gas is a bitch. Living expenses is a bitch. Trust me. So I got all 5 things out of that. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. I want to give more pointers out for like budget players and for beginner players and for expert players as well as I do discussion videos. Coming soon. When I finally get my camera fixed and whatnot, I'm gonna start doing matches. I'm gonna start doing deck profiles. I'm gonna also start doing videos on budget text, alternatives, just like I was using for misdirection for a prime example. Um, but for my second announcement, I've decided that I'm finally going to do my very first discussion project on my channel, which is going to be a 3-parter. This is one of my friends recommended that they wanted to know my opinion on the situation, and the situation is Vanguard versus Yu-Gi-Oh. Which one is a better card game? The ups and downs about it, everything about it. I could not put this in a timely manner into one video, so I'm going to make a 3-parter series on it. After that, I think I should start my Vine thingy. But outside of that, for now, this is Mrs. Zoo Nation signing out.